you're trying to find it still. I mean, from the jump, it didn't look like it was there. Just, where do you go, Billy?
Folks, it seems nowadays that every Rush Hour Golf podcast episode, and this is number 10 for you, is an emergency episode. So much stuff coming in hot off the press right now. We're literally like, hey, Pro Golf Critic,
get out the way.
I need time now. Let's make this episode.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough right now.
Last night, Pro Golf Critic put up a tweet about Billy Ho crying, and he was very much on point. And we wake up to another firestorm. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting last 24 hours. I certainly wasn't expecting the tweet that I put out there with the video of Billy Ho crying to sort of garner the amount of interest that it did. Like, to me, it's been pretty clear the last few months that like a lot of these guys have been struggling with their games, that they've been struggling mentally. To me, one of the important things about golf and to be successful in golf is you have to be able to get past some of this stuff.
Working really hard, trying to do the right things, and the team's doing everything really well. It's just, it sucked today. I mean,
don't cry, Billy. Billy, please don't cry.
Some of the people that I've looked up to in the golf world, people like Phil Mickelson, Greg Norman, Tiger Woods, like they've played some horrible rounds, but guess what? They will come up after that round, talk about the rounds. They're not going to cry about it. And I think that the whole crying about bad rounds is an indictment on just the general state of where we are in society. I don't want to get too deep on this, but people need to like have some perspective that this is a game. Number one, yes, this is, they do this for a living. They play golf for a living. And it's like, when you sign up to do that, you also sign up for the fact that, you're going to go through ups and downs in golf. And it's not something to get like emotional about. I think that, I don't think that it's just about the golf. And that's what I wanted to make it clear to people on social media, is that I think that his bad golf that he played yesterday was part of it. I actually saw it today. He shot even par, so obviously he's not playing that bad. It was just a kind of a odd round, but it's not just that. It's all of the stress and the pressure that the PGA Tour has been putting on a lot of these players. We saw it a couple months ago with Max Homa. Like, he, at the end of I think it was the Phoenix Open, like he was in tears too, because he was like really frustrated with the way he was playing.
To me, it seems like Billy Horschel is the poster boy of A Tale of Two Cities. Last year's Billy Horschel wins the Memorial. He's the champ. And now he's like one of these shoo-ins to go into the designated events if he kind of maintains form at all. This is now the Tale of Two Cities. Poor Billy Horschel shoots an 84 where he's the defending champion, and now he's on the outside looking in. And that boat, that lifeline, is shifting further and further away from him. He's drifting further and further out into the abyss of the PGA Tour's non-designated events. I think that's why he's secretly crying, because there were rumors last year, or within the past, 6 or 8 months, that he was offered a live deal. He turned it down, and now here we are. The bag is moving away. It's left the Earth's atmosphere at this point. This dude has now missed 7 of his last 13 cuts, with Bob Harrick's title talking about Billy Ho shoots a 72 with an 8 in it or something like that, having to specify that 17 holes that Billy Ho played were very good, whereas the title obviously should have been Billy Ho misses his 7th cut out of his last 13 starts. His only top 10 in that period was during a match play tournament. And that match play event obviously is gone because the sponsors are leaving the PGA Tour in droves.
No, there's definitely a lot to this. I think that there's so many sort of stories within a story within this. Like, obviously everything happened last year with a lot of the top players sort of stacking the deck on the PGA Tour in their favor. That part is causing a lot of animosity within the tour. Then you have this additional layer of Billy Ho sort of being very outspoken against Liv. I remember him going to Wentworth for the BMW PGA and reporters asking him about live stuff, and he was very, very negative about the live players, about live golf in general.
Yes, I've been a member for the last handful of years. I've only really played 4 to 6 events. Those guys, when they signed that deal and the money that they got, they factored in. They had to be smart enough to factor in that they knew that they may not be able to play either tour.
And since then, it's been found out that he was very interested in potentially playing at live. So, and it sounds like maybe there was just a little bit of a sort of price difference in terms of what he was expecting, what live was willing to spend. And I think live passing is probably going to bear itself out to be a pretty good decision. But, you know, Billy Ho has been a defender of the PGA Tour since then. He was in that Delaware meeting with the top 20 to 23 players on the PGA Tour that were basically in the process of remaking the entire PGA Tour. And here we are 9 months later. That exact sort of scheme that they concocted to sort of like stack the deck in those players' favor, it didn't take a genius to sort of figure out. Some of those guys that were in that room, they weren't all going to maintain their form for the next year. There was probably going to be a handful of guys that dropped out of that top 50 that are going to be invited into the elevated or designated events for next year. A lot of this stuff hasn't really been entirely worked out yet with the field sizes and exactly who's going to be invited. But a lot of these guys are going to find themselves on the outside looking in, where they have basically stacked the deck that they thought was in their favor, and now it's actually not in their favor.
Well, that's a great point that you mentioned, that all these guys, were pitched as the heroes, as the loyalists of the PGA Tour when they're meeting in the Delaware to build this whole new system that turned out to basically benefit them, but at that time. And at that time, when they came up with this whole scheme or this whole system, there was only going to be a 20% churn rate. So you're basically, if you were in, you're basically in this echo chamber of success. And now they changed it somewhat. So now it's a 40% churn rate. But Billy Ho, I think, is realizing with the way it's set up, if he doesn't get in now, it's going to be a lot harder to get in 2025. And now you have this PGA Tour golden boy who's likely going to be at these 3M Opens trying to get his way into a John Deere Classic, to get his way into an elevated event. I'm curious how you think that Jay Monahan and co. are going to tweak the system and maybe put a few more asterisks in there to get Billy Ho in. And also, let's not forget, Justin Thomas is sinking like a stone lately.
The first question is, where is Jay Monahan? Like, no one's, he hasn't really spoken to the press in a while. I think part of the reason is because, like I've said from the beginning, like he's just not a leader. There is a void of leadership on the PGA Tour now, especially with Rory just deciding to sort of take a couple steps back in this battle with Liv. It's like, where's the leadership? Tiger is gone. Tiger is on the mend. Rory has totally shut up. Billy Ho is struggling. Jay Monahan is nowhere to be found. Justin Thomas is struggling. Like, who's the leaders on the PGA Tour now?
Well, you just mentioned Jay Monahan. He's the head of the PGA Tour, correct?
He's the commissioner. Yeah.
So what's going on? Why does he almost never give statements as to what's going on now?
Because I don't think he knows what's going on. Like, I really don't think that he is not, piloting this ship at all. Like he's having he's basically having to totally defer to, a lot of the top players, but the top players were Tiger and Rory. Guess what? Where are they? Tiger's on the mend. Rory's not talking. So it's like, where's the leadership? Like, what's I don't think Jay Monahan has any idea of exactly how things are going to look in 2024, which is probably part of the reason why he's been very, very quiet. So that's probably part of the reason why we haven't seen him. We haven't heard from him. He hasn't even given out any statements as far as I could tell. Maybe that changes over the next few weeks, but is totally AWOL.
What's interesting is the person that jumps in to defend Billy Horschel's honor is none other than Colt Knost.
Yeah, that was another unexpected thing. So, I obviously commented that video earlier, and we had Colt Knost chime in, we had JT Poston chime in, we had I think someone told me Smiley Kaufman chime in too. I haven't really been paying attention as closely on Twitter. I've got other things going on.
I have paid attention. And what I'd like to point out about JT Poston, pointing out that you have a blue check mark, he should also note that Rory McIlroy has a blue check mark.
Yeah, well, look, if they want to tell the PJ Tour and their sycophants to stop creating imposter accounts of me, I'll be glad to relinquish my blue check mark. But for the time being, it's got to stay until this whole thing is over. I mean, who knows how long this is gonna drag out. But yeah, so Colt was really butthurt about my post about Billy Ho. He felt like I was making fun of him, which I'm not making fun of Billy Horschel.
He was crying. You're pointing out a fact.
Like there's nothing I can there's nothing that I could do to embarrass him more.
Were you cutting onions nearby?
I don't. It's just so silly to me that one, he was crying about a bad round, and then probably what's worse than that is just all of the PJ Tour sycophants that have been in my mentions and DMs over the last 24 hours, trying to defend this. That's the thing that's totally silly to me. I couldn't imagine defending, if somebody that I knew played a bad round and after the round was crying to me about it, he would never hear the end of it from me, because I would be maybe these people need a little bit more tough love. We need to, in the immortal words of James Hahn, everybody needs to sack up right now. This is not the fact that some of these guys are so emotionally spent or emotionally tied up in this stuff to the point of tears. And Billy Ho is not the only one. We got to call this stuff out and say, look, crying in sports, I'm not saying that all crying is bad. If it's some sort of emotional achievement that you've obtained, for example, Michael Jordan winning his first championship, he cried his eyes out. Totally acceptable.
Little did Michael Jordan know later that him crying would become a meme.
Well, that was much later, and that crying wasn't necessarily as well. I guess it was appropriate. It was I think that was at his Hall of Fame speech. I can't remember exactly, but yeah. So I mean, a lot of athletes have cried. LeBron James after winning a championship in Cleveland, totally acceptable. If players win after winning a major, I said this on Twitter, if Rory McIlroy cries because he finally breaks through and wins the Masters, that is a very emotionally charged moment, and he should cry for that. That's totally fine. The problem is when people are crying because of poor play and things like that. To me, that reeks of some sort of emotional instability or just lack of maturity. That's something that little kids are doing in Little League. This is not, we need to hold our athletes and golfers to higher standards than this, which is part of the reason why all of my favorite players, Tiger Woods, Phil Mickelson, Greg Norman, Dustin Johnson, Patrick Reed, Brooks Koepka, these guys are not crying after a bad round. And that's part of the reason why they're some of the greatest players of all time. So it's just that's the standard that needs to be set for all golfers.
I don't think I've ever cried after a bad round, and I have a lot of bad rounds. Colt Knost has invited you on the Subpar podcast.
Look, I honestly I don't listen to his podcast. I don't know exactly what the format is. I have told him that I have a couple of conditions. One, he has to unblock you of Big Boy Pants Golf on Twitter because he blocked you about a month ago for no real good reason. Like it was not a blockable offense. So Colt, I'm gonna need you to I'm gonna need you to unblock my boy here. Two, I really wanted to have him invite the two of us because, like they're saying on YouTube, you and I are the dynamic duo of truth in the golf community. So, you know, we're a great team. He wants to divide and conquer. I know exactly what Colt's planning on. And guess what? I'll be ready for him if I ever decide to go on his podcast. Maybe I want to make him come on the Rush Hour podcast first because I think he has a lot of explaining to do, way more explaining than I need to do to him. So, we'll have to see how all that pans out.
Rule number 3, Colt: no crying.
Yes, I can promise you, if I come on your podcast, there's nothing you can say, nothing you can do that's gonna move me to tears. I can promise you that. So that's something that like you need to keep in mind. That like, look, like I said, crying is acceptable in very very specific circumstances. It is not acceptable in the circumstances that Billy Ho had.
Folks, if anyone out there knows Colt Knost, tell him that maybe he has both of us on his subpar podcast, and that's the name of the podcast. It's not about the level of the podcast. Subscribe, share, and like.
Get out the way. Who got a watch? Who got the time? I'm raising the clock. Even in my feelings, grind don't stop. Got big dreams, one big